Thank you. Good evening. I'll bring the Lisbon Town Council Workshop for September 29th, 2015 order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much and good evening. If we could start off with the first item, please.
Okay, that'll be roll call. Counselor Garrison?
He'll be here in a few minutes.
Okay, Counselor Lunt?
Here.
Counselor McTevier?
Here.
Counselor Bickford?
Here.
Counselor Crafts?
Here.
Counselor Pesky?
Here.
Counselor Brunel?
He will be excused tonight.
Okay.
And we'll start off with this next item, please.
The next item is dispatch consolidation discussion.
We have Eric Sampson, the sheriff, and I don't know if Chief Brooks, if you want to join us up here tonight to key in on any discussion. I'm more than welcome to take a seat if you would like. Diane, do you want to start us off?
The reason we have this on the agenda tonight is so that we can move forward maybe at the next council meeting on October 6th for a formal vote to see if council wants to consolidate local dispatching with the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Department. I asked Sheriff Sampson to be here tonight to give an update to the council on where we stand for funding on this project. And I did some preliminary figures here on what I thought we might estimate our savings to be if we should go down this route. And some of the reasons why we need to have a vote is we do have contracts with some local communities, and they have been asking if Lisbon is going to, in fact, go to the county, because we have one that's due at the end of the year and then another one due in 6 months after that. So we have to be looking at that, whether we're going to do a 6-month contract or what we're going to do. And also so the county can prepare during their budget, because they're working on the budget right now. And it's going to take probably 6 months to get all of this together once a decision is made, 6 months plus. So it's not something that you can wait till after the first of the year to decide. You need to decide before year end, and the sooner the better, so everybody can prepare. So I just, not knowing what the total cost for us would be, other than what our police dispatch fee and our fire dispatch fee would be. I know what those costs are, and pretty much what the IMC licensing would be. It's the other costs, like the connectivity and security, and any one-time hardware costs and labor to get this ball rolling. I'm not sure what all that is going to be, but I figured high. I figured about all of that together comes to about $146,650. Some of that is one-time costs. Right now, it's costing our dispatch, and I just did the wages, uniforms, recruitment, testing, and advertising and notices. That's the biggest part of our budget right now, and that's $337,531. So if you subtract the 146 from that, you're looking at approximately $190,000 in savings. And then from that, you need to subtract the revenue that we receive from the other communities. This is just something really quick that I did today. I need to refine it some more, but you're probably looking at maybe $140,000 to $150,000 worth of savings. And that includes the one-time costs that we'd have to do up front. Obviously, after that, there would be more savings. But, if we want to go down that route. And then the other part that I did not factor in is, if you should do this, are you going to want to hire a secretary to man that office, say Monday through Friday, to deal with the walk-in traffic? Typically, that's what happens. So there would be some additional costs there if you decided to do that. And any other one-time costs that you might want to do for the public, as far as having some type of a phone or an intercom system on the outside of the building where you could call directly a 911 call right to the county, or to ring for an officer that may be inside the building when the doors are locked. Things like that I haven't factored in, but those again would be one-time costs. So I think now would probably be a good time if the sheriff could give us an update on where the county stands with this project.
Well, first of all, we didn't get the grant, and I had discussed the two options of funding. Plan A would be to build everything into the budget. Plan B was the grant opportunity. Well, that's passed. What I did,
Can you grab that microphone for me?
sure.
Public will want to be able to hear you.
Sorry about that. What we did is, in building the budget, we worked with all the providers needed to see what we would need to take on Lisbon, and we submitted a budget proposal for dispatch services of an additional $225,000 approximately to handle the dispatch consolidation with the town of Lisbon. That was taken into account that we would also take on all of Lisbon's current customers. Some of them have records management, some don't. The costs are obviously more for those that do. But the whole build-out for our budget included Lisbon and all the communities and agencies you're providing service to. Some of it's capital equipment that we would need, consoles, hardware, things like that. Others is the technology aspect, the data migration from your current records management system and where we get our records management provider through LACOM. So a huge chunk was one-time cost. $68,000 of that was IMC licensing fees. Currently, everybody pays a licensing fee yearly. There's a small reduction to everybody for doing a consolidated bill. So $68,000 of the $225,000 was just your yearly licensing fees, which we would build out to every agency we provide service to. So when you actually look at the 225 and you narrow some things down, the investment the county would be able to make in order to handle Lisbon and Lisbon's call volume was $160,000. We managed to schedule we got to work it on the potential for the call volume that Lisbon would bring. It called for adding 3 additional staff. That was budgeted in. We budgeted, make it on the assumption that Lisbon would come on in July if you choose to go forward. We budgeted to hire 3 employees at 9 months to give us 3 months to train them. So we budgeted high. I budgeted high on all the expenses and low on revenues. I figured that was the safe way to go. The hope would be that some of your current employees would be interested in positions with the Sheriff's Department. It would save us in training. The orientation would be a lot smoother. But worst case scenario, we'd hire people and we'd put them through a 3-month training program to have them ready. We've gone through the ideas and the concepts of how we want it run and managed. I've submitted to the commissioners from existing personnel a reclassification of a position. I submitted that to them last month. They're in support of it. Next Wednesday, I should have their approval if they want to make any amendments to the job description, but what will allow is for an administrative position to just oversee the whole dispatch consolidation from the beginning of its inception throughout. We want to provide a better service and more involvement. We do want to have an advisory group made up of users. So there's things that we're committed to do throughout this program. The commissioners have been supportive. Everything was approved in the budget process from their end, and now it's moved on to the budget committee. From that end, the commissioners have committed to this program as much as they can from their perspective, which would be adequate funding to be able to take on Lisbon Communications and to provide the service to all your existing customers. I don't know if there's anything more than that you were looking to add, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
When did you find out about you didn't get the grant?
Well, there was actually 2 issues with the grant. We submitted the application. They had a holiday weekend issue. When we heard back, we found out there was a technical error with the grant. So I contacted, and they told us how to appeal it. Well, we went through the appeal process. That would have been mid-July, I would say. We went through the appeals process. Senator Collins' office got involved. They helped us out. And then we found out about mid to late August that they wouldn't honor the appeal of the technical violation. They told us to reapply with the technical difficulty with the grant. And what that was is the records weren't updated in the past 4 or 5 years from our treasurer's office on who was eligible to apply for grants. So they said it didn't meet the definition of a technical reason to appeal. Even with Senator Collins' office involved, they weren't willing to consider the application at all.
And it would just been nice to know a little bit beforehand. That
Yeah.
you go ahead and got the grant.
All right, does anybody have any comments or questions for the sheriff or Chief Brooks or manager? I have a list of questions, but I'll start off with everybody else first. Anything? Just so make sure my brain has it all wrapped around correctly. The one-time cost of approximately $147,000.
A part of that is the one-time cost, so it would be the hardware and software and any labor to do that, which you're looking at about $34,000, $35,000 of that.
So $34,000 to $35,000 one-time
That's,
cost?
and that's figuring high.
So what is the remaining balance of the 146?
Okay, so the police dispatch fee is $6.15 per capita, and I did that I used 9,100 per capita. That comes to $55,965, and then the fire dispatch is $2.50 per capita, which comes to $22,750. Those would be annual costs that we would have to pay Androscoggin County. And then we have the annual cost of the IMC licensing, which is about $13,895.
Okay.
And then what I don't know is the connectivity and the security. I did get a quote from SimQuest today, but I'm not sure that we're going to be using those. I figured for the dark fiber, $7,200, and those would be annual costs, and then the backup of $9,600, and that would be an annual cost to back up the data. But after talking to the sheriff just a few minutes ago, dark fiber is not available for us, so there's going to have to be an alternative to that.
Okay. So that still puts us our yearly savings roughly of $140,000 to $150,000.
And then you have to subtract the $68,000 in revenue.
I thought that was with.
Well,
Living.
you already, yes, right, from the 190. I've got 190,000 in estimated savings and subtract the 68 from that.
Okay, very good. All right. What about, currently we provide dispatch for Lisbon Emergency. Has anyone brought them into this loop? And would they be going over there because they're a private entity? How would that work?
What I budgeted for was taking on everybody you currently provide service to. And I now recall they're a private entity, not under the city, so no, they are the only agency that there's been no communication with. But everything's spec'd out as far as records management, in anticipation of call volume, they were included in. It would be just a matter of, are they doing what Green's doing, what Durham's doing, and even what Lisbon did themselves, which would be check with other providers to see if they have the interest in taking them on as well.
Can you legally take them on?
I can look into it. I brought up the concern about the private entity issue, and nobody seems to know where that came from.
Okay.
So it would involve a little bit of research, but nothing,
Okay.
I'm sure, too complex.
Do you guys plan on bringing Lisbon Emergency in the loop soon?
We would have to.
Okay.
Basically, what we're doing is we're with the reclassification of staff, posting a position, hiring somebody. It would be to work with everybody we're going to provide service to. The records management aspect can't get involved with us other than as far as building, and building would involve all the users until the money is there. So that would mean when our budget's final, January. There'd be a 3-month of building the IMC system and what we'd want in it, along with everybody we're providing services to, the users group. And it takes approximately 3 months for data migration. That's why it's 6 months. So we would want to hit it January 1st right out of the gate, good to go, everybody involved, and obviously we would need commitments beforehand. If that answers your question at all.
Yep, it does. All right. The other question I had was, I'm assuming the contract that Lisbon would enter into would be with the county commissioners. Do you have any idea what type of contract they're looking at?
I had suggested, just because the initial investment in the cost we were incurring to get some guarantees would be probably a 3-year commitment. I think that would be fair. I had mentioned that in the beginning. Again, it's not in my scope of my authority, but I think it would serve everybody's best interests. I don't think it's unreasonable. That's what I think I recommended to them as part of this process a couple of times. They were receptive to it. I think it provides some securities for whoever comes on, and it also provides some revenue streams for them that are guaranteed for making the initial cost up front.
I'm glad to hear you were roughly thinking a 3-year commitment, because one of my concerns with this would be is we would enter into an agreement in the first year, we would pay the dispatching fee for police and fire, and then the next year the commissioners would change the fee structure, and that would strike, high. So I'm concerned to make sure that we have a locked-in rate that the council knows about going into this, because it is a commitment.
Yep. And the fee structure, and I'm glad you're aware of it, it's not mine, it's the county commissioners. But in meeting with them, when they set the fee structure, I think it was about a month ago, they asked my opinion, and I said, it looks as though you've set up a structure to balance out the cost or offset some of the expenses with communications. I think it works for what their purpose is. And I think from experience we have with other communities, if you get too far off of it, you're actually going to lose money.
Okay.
You're not using any of the equipment that's here though, right?
Correct. You'll be,
It stays here, so should 3 years down the road, this doesn't work out for us, we could always fire ours back up.
basically what we looked at doing is, since in the beginning of the conversations, was to use Lisbon as the backup. So it would also support keeping your equipment here in place.
One of the other concerns that I had was our staff we currently have here. I don't like to hear about or see anybody lose a job, so I'm pleased to hear that you're thinking about offering our staff opportunity to hire when you do open those positions.
Well, and the commissioners had asked to give them some credit if they would, if there'd be any consideration, any interest, and because we were also budgeting the training aspect, could be up to 3 months. There'd be a savings for the county if your employees would want to come on. So everybody's well aware. Nobody wants to see somebody go jobless out of a consolidation. Currently, I think we're full staff. That's with the reclassification in mind. That'll obviously open up a job. And we budgeted for 3 additional positions to make for 16 hours of more coverage. And, that could be tweaked as this evolves and goes on once we see what we're going to experience for call volume.
Okay. One of the other things that I was a little concerned about thinking about it is accuracy, because in Lisbon we have a very strong communication center, from my opinion, and these people that work in there are from Lisbon, the majority, so they could say, someone could call and describe something, and most of the time, probably these ladies and gentlemen in the communication center would be able to recognize where the caller is a lot of times, which is important to me if I was calling for help. So one of the things that public will needs to be aware about is, it would be a transition period, and your staff will have to get used to Lisbon and the layout. So I was wondering what type of training module or would you guys go through to ensure, Lisbon, continues that level of service?
Well, typically right now when we put a dispatcher through the FTO program, there's a portion of hours dedicated to riding along so they can understand the community, understanding that we could be at one end and it takes us 45 minutes to an hour, 15 minutes to get to the other end on a patrol call. It helps out a lot of the people we hire are from the community, so they're familiar, or they've worked as volunteer firefighters, or have worked for other communication center. That seems to be what we've been experiencing lately. But part of the FTO program is they do ride along and learn. They get a little bit familiar with the areas, so I'm pretty sure we'd continue that
very
and
good.
probably expand that. It's worthwhile. I do agree with you there.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I may?
Yes, Chief.
I probably won't need that, but I'll take it. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here this evening. Wish we'd had an opportunity to meet and go over some of these questions prior to this, but that didn't happen. One thing I just learned sitting here tonight that's really problematic with this whole picture is that black fiber is not available. That is going to be a costly, or I should say, more costly to both the Sheriff's Department and to Lisbon than if it had been available, according to our shared radio provider. He made that clear at our last meeting when we met prior to July when you came here, that if we don't have black fiber, we're going to have more radio equipment for connectivity of the frequencies, et cetera, et cetera. And there's nothing in this package that I've heard that indicates anything about that.
Actually, I'm not a tech. I believe dark fiber was the most expensive component of it all. And I do know there was connectivity with high internet capabilities that was built in as far as the server, which they estimated, I believe it was anywhere from $200 to $600 a month as opposed to the dark fiber costs. The tech end aspect, I was not involved with, other than working with Dirigo and all the providers, and we hired a consultant to come in after, just to look at the whole project, to make sure we identified every possible pitch, anything that might have been overlooked. He made one recommendation for switches. So technology, communications, records management is not my area of expertise. I'm hugely dependent on, the IT department at the county, people familiar with IMC, and the current providers we're all using, as well as the radio engineers that we use. So what was incorporated in our budget as far as expenses and some of the costs that the town manager is looking at was figures that they provided that would needed to be absorbed in order to make this work. So as far as the detail of it, other than explaining to them that when they said everything is finite, the better equipment you budget for, the better you plan, the less maintenance issues you'll have. That's what we did. I wanted to buy quality equipment to assure that we were going to reduce any potential problems rather than keeping out on something that will cost us more or affect services later on. But as far as the detail of what you're just talking about, I relied on that.
When the budget was put together, again, bear with me.
Yeah.
Was the budget put together with the knowledge that black fiber was not available?
When we submitted the budget to the county commissioners, yes. When we submitted for the grant, it went on speculation that if black fiber is available, or dark fiber, that would be the way to go. They didn't know at that time. What they found out later on was that there's nobody that provides dark fiber from Auburn to Lisbon, whether Oxford Networks or any of the other providers. So it's just not available, which is why they said now we'll have to go this route, which was a high internet capability with 2 firewalls or 2 circuit. I don't remember the exact term. They had a way of this is how it's going to be delivered.
Okay, I haven't been privy to that. I'm not aware. My last conversation was about dark fiber. The grant was for $600,000
Yep.
plus or minus
Yep.
to take on the consolidation. And in the budget, you have $23,000 for console. Is the other $577,000 someplace else?
No,
I don't know how the budget was made out. And not on you.
No, yeah, I can explain.
I went and tried to find out from the county what went on with your budget, and this was the minutes of a 4-hour and 24-minute budget meeting in Androscoggin County, and 3/4 of the page is who attended. That's all I found. If we tried to do that in Lisbon, I can just imagine.
You want to try it?
But
Yeah.
get my point, I couldn't find any information.
Do you want me to explain the difference between grant and budget?
Well, what bothers me is that the grant went for 600,000.
Yep.
Your budget has whatever money it has in it, but it doesn't have 600,000.
Right.
So at what point in time, or down the road, are we gonna see the remainder of the 600,000 that you put in the grant?
Well, currently, the county has a server. Part of the grant was asking for a server. When you have a server, you need battery backups. Then there was a difference between, do you need 2 or do you need 3, or how many backups do you need, all involving a cost. Well, what was recommended we do is, for grant purposes, budget the highest capabilities possible. The county has a server, so a server wasn't needed. A server was put in the grant, but that would have allowed for all of the law enforcement to be independent of the county server. Part of the grant was 2 consoles, not 1. Part of the grant was $90,000 for dark fiber. Obviously, that's gone. So right there, we're looking $90,000, $25,000 for a console. There's 115 of your missing money. A server, I think, was $60,000. The battery backups, I think, were $15,000 a piece. So there's probably another couple $100,000, and I think that's where the difference lies. From the beginning, it was agreed to for grant, we would consider everything possible, knowing that grants aren't always funded, but it would give us huge opportunities. And for budget purposes, we would do high quality, what would be needed to get the project done and to offer the service. And again, these were things that the providers, Dirigo, SimQuest, and there was a third one, were involved in specking out the 2 concepts. Unfortunately, we didn't get the grant, as we all know, and we submitted for budget purposes what would be required to provide the service. That's the best explanation I can give, I guess.
Just to follow up on that piece, I can see where the chief is going with that question, and if I would have known that, I would have asked the same question. So we're not going to entail any additional costs, say next year or the year after, because for the server or anything like that?
No, I think the only cost you're going to have is your licensing fees through IMC, which you currently pay, and the fees through the county per capita cost for fire, EMS, and police, which the figures have been provided, and I believe they've been consistent since they started them.
Yes.
But it seems as though we kind of, the sticking point is that dark fiber or whatever it is.
Yep.
What are we gonna do to replace it?
From the conversation I just made in there, or had in there, instead of dark fiber, which isn't available, so it can't be done. I believe the term was used was a high-intensity internet line with 2 firewalls or 2 something. It was how it was described to me. What would be done there is it's available, and it would just be the connectivity which you'd have regardless if it was dark fiber or the internet lines. The dark fiber, your town manager gave you the figure, the internet line's less, but they didn't give us, it was just a generic estimate. It could be as much as $600, as low as $300, where dark fiber, I think, was $700 and something dollars, so.
That's per frequency.
That was,
I don't know.
that was just the cost they gave to run the line.
Because I know dark fiber, when it was explained to us, I think it was 5 frequencies per line. I do not know what this new system is you're talking about.
Can we get an update on this situation before the council takes a vote?
Yeah, actually, we discussed setting up another meeting with the providers to get everything itemized for for the council
Very good.
in order to make a
I'd
decision.
like-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I vote, I'd like to know
I-
exactly what it's gonna
Yeah.
cost us now.
Yeah.
No, and I
Not
didn't know
too
what I
many
was coming here
guesses.
for, and this is, your cost. I knew ours and
Yeah.
what that was.
No, I recognize that, but I think we're on the same page that we want to, because it is a big switch, and, there's people in the community that really want this to happen, and there are people that don't want it to happen, so I know I as a council want to make the best judgment that I can, know as much as I do before I take a vote too, so.
Yeah, and we've been going back and forth with them because We're in the budget process. You know, it's checks and balances constantly, it's timelines. You know, they kind of want to know what they're looking at, and they know that, you know, if everything's a go, it's going to be a start of January, a conclusion for July 1st, so.
Yep.
And again, we're using them now, so they're familiar with our, you know, internal structure.
Okay.
Another point that I know we spoke on this in the spring of 14. The question came up on our Homeland Security grant that purchased the equipment that we have now. And we're still tied into that Homeland Security grant until August 30th of 2017. And this should be familiar with all but probably one counselor sitting here right now, that we still have a commitment to the Department of Homeland Security on that grant. And if we pull out, you'll have to make notification to them, and then they'll decide on what happens with that. But I do know that one of the side impacts to that is that Mr. Fitzgerald told me at MEMA is if the town gets into a competitive grant process down the road, that pulling out early from a previously awarded grant could have an impact on the potential award for a future grant. Not that it's going to happen, it all depends on what the grant is and how competitive it is. And I do know that we have had preliminary talks with the school department in regards to coming up with a generator system large enough to make the new gymnasium an emergency shelter. That's a pretty significant grant right there. So I'm just, again, reminding you, because we've had this conversation already. I should be seeing some heads nodding here because we've had this conversation. And we are still, that 2011 Homeland Security grant does not expire until August 30th of 2007. Did I say 17? Yeah.
Can you guys pull that information together and try to work with the office to see what type of cost the town would entail, if there is a cost associated if we pull out early, and what that looks like for us as well, as a follow-up? Because I have no idea if it's just, you know, a black mark against our name or it's a cost associated, and I want to know that
Well,
too.
back then, again, that's over a year now, but back then the FEMA auditors were in Augusta, and they advised MEMA, DOT, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Maine Emergency Management Agency, and because FEMA was auditing MEMA, and FEMA told them that there was a number of scenarios. Could be no impact, could be partial payback, payback depreciated costs. There's a number of scenarios the feds could come up with, but we weren't there yet, so we didn't go there.
Okay. Well, since we're getting closer, I think it'd be important we try to figure that out a little more. Anything else, Chief?
Not at this time. I'd appreciate if we could be part of your meetings, because my concern is that there's going to be more cost here than we foresee when it comes to radio technology. We've been there and done it, and the county has too. They know it's not always as it's presented.
No, and I, you know, on the radio aspect, I think we agreed in the beginning that was probably the easiest part of the whole. Ironically, the dispatch and communication radio aspect was simple in comparison to the whole records management piece. And in dealing with, you know, the providers, they're basically saying we can make a radio jump in 3 weeks. But when you look at records management, there's a lot more involved. It's a lot more costly, and you want to meet everybody's needs because there's, you know, features available in different systems. You know, you brought up something, if I just can comment on it. There's a lot of people that, you know, support what you're doing or looking at, and there's a lot of people that support maintaining what you have.
Yeah.
And I get it. I just want to let people know, I was asked to, you know, did we have the capabilities,
Sure.
would be willing, and, you know, I responded. So, you know, and I can understand, you know, people's ownership of it. I get that. This is going to be a decision for the council, the chief, your town manager, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of community input. But I just don't want to leave here with the impression that I came knocking through the door saying, hey, I want to do this, and force people to do things they don't want to do.
I think we contacted you.
Yeah, okay, I just,
All right.
yeah, and that's all. You
I
know?
thought you rang the doorbell.
No.
It was, and I'm, the public that follows this whole.
I mean, it's a
meeting.
great opportunity for us. I will, and would be excited to take on not only Lisbon, but all the other, but I just, it was nothing that I was going after people's positions, people's services, you know, I wasn't crossing any lines territorially. Just want to make that clear sitting here tonight.
No, I know that I as a counselor, you know, I receive a lot of phone calls, and a lot of times I was asked on the communication center, so it came to the point where you know, I felt that I didn't have enough information, and when I was asked questions, I couldn't answer them, and I wanted the council to look into this further to see if it's feasible, what the options were, and this is how we got here today. So, you know, I personally recognize that you weren't knocking on the manager's office to try to take it over, so.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from council on this? All right, thank you.
I'm
Oh, go
not
ahead.
sure we'll be ready for a vote next week, and I think we should have another workshop on this instead of, or do you think we're gonna have enough stuff together by next week that we go over it and?
If we don't have it by next week, then we can go to next week.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, the feedback I got from the commissioners at this point is they have budgeted and submitted to the budget committee taking on the project. It goes through the budget committee process. If there's some sort of major change beforehand, obviously it would be removed. The other issue was we would remove certain things in our budget or not spend the money if it was budgeted. Also knowing that you guys would have a timeline, we're on a calendar year budget, you're on a
Yep.
fiscal year budget, and you have services and contracts with other people. So we would need to build or start the building process like January to get it done the smoothest way possible for the transition for July 1st. So basically there's alternatives, like you can do 3 months of a program like this, or have it done right and built out to full, you know, and that's how we prefer it done. We just, if you're gonna do it right. That's what we're looking at.
I would say if staff could work hard to try to get everything ready for the next council meeting, we'll be in communication, and if you feel you're not ready, then we won't put it on the agenda, and we can put a workshop together. We'll play it by ear. Okay. Thank you very much, Sheriff, and thank you very much, Chief, for coming tonight to talk about this.
I'd like to thank you both for all your hard work and effort you put into this. I know it, you know, we sit up here and say, find us some facts, but you guys put a lot of time and work into it, so thank you for all that effort.
It's not always fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item number 4, please.
Police officer vacancy discussion.
Diane?
This will be really quick. As you know, we have a vacancy, a police officer vacancy currently that we have not filled, but we're going through the process. But before we invested any money in this process, because it is costly, I just wanted to make sure that council still wanted us to fill the position. And the reason I'm bringing it up tonight is because the police chief had a meeting with the superintendent last week to discuss the school budget, and should it pass, he talked about the SROs might be positions that would go away. So if that happened, I just wanted to put that on the table so that you could give us direction. We're fine with going through the process and hiring the vacancy, but I just wanted you to know that that may be out there. That's the first time that, you know, someone's actually come and talked to us about it, or talked to the police chief. So before we filled it, I wanted to make sure that you wanted us to go down that road.
Which position is it?
It's a police officer.
I know, is it a patrolman or what are we
Yes, a
talking about?
patrol
I
position.
think you probably ought to fill it.
Okay.
You never know you don't know what the school department's gonna do.
Nope. No, but I just wanted you to know what we have learned, so I didn't want to go and fill it, then wish you had known about it before we filled it, so.
I mean, I'm okay with it being filled personally, but if the school budget passes in November and the school department cuts the SROs because they feel that SROs aren't needed or they're not a priority over other things, then we're going to have to either go into undesignated to fund these positions, or we're going to have to lay somebody off, right? So, I mean, to me, I don't know what the council feels, but personally, if we're gonna lay somebody off, maybe we should wait a month or two until the budget, you know, vote is over, and try not to lay somebody off if the budget does pass.
So they just move a patrolman SRO to the patrolman position, right?
Because right now, we pay 25, right? 25%?
Of two positions, yeah.
So if you take that 25 out for the two, we could come up with a little bit of money to fund one SRO as patrolman, and one could go into another slot, you know, because they still have a detective position to fill. So we don't have to lay somebody off.
I don't think they're gonna wanna go.
I hope not, but
I think we ought to be prepared.
So the consensus is to just move forward and fill the position if we find a suitable candidate?
If you find a suitable candidate.
I'd like to hear what Chief's take is on it.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, my take is the first budget that was presented to you was 17,000 cut. The second budget had another 100,000 plus cut, so it's, and that cut a position. So we're already short on what we have been in the past, plus I have a vacancy. I can't do anything within the department until I fill a patrol spot. I can't fix the detective's issue right now until that patrol piece is fixed. I'm gonna have to start the hiring process again, because we've already gone through the hiring process, and the candidate that was given a conditional offer of employment didn't sign it because of what's going on in town. And he was afraid that he'd get here and then be gone. So that's a problem already with trying to recruit. But in order to start the process again, this is already, say, October 1st. By the time I get the advertising in and done again, et cetera, and the testing, we're going to be past the November referendum before we can even,
Start
you know,
interviewing.
interview it.
go for it.
So,
I'd say go for it then, if it's going to put you out that far.
at least do the process, see what we get.
You know, if that's how long it's gonna take you, then I'm all good with you doing that. I just don't want, you know, you to hire somebody on, and then something happen, you know, that budget passed, and the school department decides to cut SROs, and the council then have to say, well, we're not gonna pony up any more money, and have to lay somebody off that you just hired. So, it sounds like you have a good plan, and
Okay. We'll make it work.
you all set with that, Diane? Okay. Thank you very much. And number 5, please.
And the shooting range ordinance discussion?
I think Diane's getting
Yeah.
it.
I'll just start this, and then maybe the police chief can fill in. He's got more institutional knowledge on this than... But I don't know if recently, if you've seen in the paper and on the news, the Cape Elizabeth has developed an ordinance for their shooting ranges in their community.
Not in Massachusetts.
What's that? Yeah, right.
Massachusetts.
Yes.
So, you know, we've been receiving some complaints regarding the Lisbon Fish and Game, and the complaints mainly are on the safety and noise issues. I have a complainant in the room here tonight, Barry Fuller, who's contacted me a couple of times, and I know he's talked to the police chief, and he really wanted us to bring this issue to council, so that's why we're here tonight. And the police chief, I know he's got more information on complaints because he's had them over the years.
We have, and again, the concern that we have is bullet containment. My understanding is that the Fish and Game is making an effort to improve a berm. Bottom line is that this came back to us at this degree because of the happenings in Cape Elizabeth, Massachusetts. And
Right.
but what Cape did is that they found themselves in the exact same scenario. They had a firing range that was a concern for a residential area, but they had absolutely no regulatory authority to do anything about it. So they started by creating a committee. Can't remember what it was called now, Shooting Range Committee, for lack of a better term. It was a study committee to look into the issues, et cetera, and then the history timeline after that, the Cape Elizabeth Council adopted an ordinance that did give the municipality some regulation and enforcement authority on a shooting range. Again, this mirrors Lisbon, because Lisbon currently has no ordinances on the books that gives us any authority to regulate or enforce any activity at the shooting range. None. In this case, it's the Lisbon Fish and Game, because they're the only shooting range in town. Good, bad, or indifferent, it is what it is. So if the town wanted to get into a position where they needed to regulate shooting ranges, and not just the current one, but any potential other ones that may come to town, we have no ordinance to do it, so we would need to have something. Doesn't have to be as restrictive as Cape Elizabeth. I'm not even gonna go there. There's a number of things in the Cape Elizabeth one that I have difficulty with when I read it. But again, I truly think that your best thing right now is, instead of yay or nay in anything, and I'm sure there's a lot of opinions out here, pro and con, and I respect all of those, but I think in the best interest of our town, I think we take the Cape Elizabeth lead and create this, the council create this committee of members of Fish and Game, a committee that also comprises neighbors of the Fish and Game, because they are the big players here right now, and also the code enforcement officer, because it comes under code enforcement, and someone on the police department will be part of it, if it mirrors how Kate did it, and whoever the council wants to put on the committee, but just don't make it such a large committee that it, isn't gonna work. But users and et cetera, and sit down and see where we should head with this. I think that there's a liability possibility here, only because we don't have any regulations, and that is occurring out there. And where does the liability, where's that line drawn? I don't know. I truly don't. State regulations are very thin on this. Noise ordinance, for example, our noise ordinance cannot be enforced on a local shooting range if the ordinance was established after the shooting range was established, which is our case. They were there long before we had a noise ordinance.
Right.
So Lisbon can't even begin to go out there and say, put silencers on there. Oh, by the way, you have to federally regulate them, but we just can't do it. So my point is, we really, our hands are tied for any type of regulatory control, et cetera, et cetera. Making them, let's say you had to make them move their berm, you can't do that, because you don't have the authority to do it.
Okay.
Maybe you don't want the authority, but again, let's get a group together to work on it and see what direction it goes.
I'd recommend that, then we'll just table the rest of it.
Okay.
And we can figure out who we would like to put on the committee. I have a good idea. I believe he's sitting right next to our code enforcement officer. There'd be one person I'd like to see on the committee.
Is council in consensus to move forward with putting a committee together to look at it? You guys have,
I think there should be a counselor on it myself. I think there should be at least
Uh,
one sitting counselor on it.
I can't sit on it. I'd love to, but I
Not a member of the Fish and Game.
no, I'm not a member.
Oh,
Yet.
okay.
Was passed.
Diane, can you contact Fish and Game president or whoever they have over there and get a list of a couple people that would be willing to serve on that committee? And then at the next council meeting, I'll establish a committee and appoint these people that we choose to the committee to move forward as a standalone committee. Okay.
Do you think we could, Paul, maybe, do you think that a member of the warden service would come on to that committee?
We can ask. I mean, we can ask. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know.
Right.
I mean, we can ask.
Can I ask, I'd like to try to get one from the warden service. If we could.
I know the warden that was very active, maybe some of the Fish and Game people will remember, the warden that was very active in trying to work with us years ago, he's passed away, Warden Stone. And if he was still around, he'd jump right on the opportunity to help was here, but we'll have to see who's available now.
Cape Elizabeth came up with a committee, they wrote down in the ordinance how they made it up, and it looks pretty good. You might want to start there as far as direct.
Thank you, Don.
But you're gonna be on the committee, Don, so.
All right, does anybody have anything else on this before we move forward? Do you have anything, Chief?
No, I'm okay. No, I'm all set.
Okay. Thanks for bringing this forward and your suggestion for the committee. I think that's a good move.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from council? All right. Before we adjourn, I will take an opportunity to acknowledge anyone in the public that would like to address the council on anything we discussed this evening. Mr. Fillmore.
Yes, you spent money, taxpayers' money on a police study. The police study said we had 30 to 40% unobligated time. Before we start filling positions, we need to be guaranteed we've eliminated our unobligated time so that all of our officers are spending their time properly. 30 to 40% a shift is 1 man a day. Come on now, we need to save money. We need to correct that study before we do any more hiring. Thank you.
Just to briefly respond to that, Larry, I know you've talked about the 30 to 40% unobligated time, but at the end of the day, they're sitting in a patrol car running traffic. It's considered unobligated time, but they are making an impact on people speeding. Proactive police enforcement of driving around in hotspot areas. I mean, might be unobligated time, but they are making an impact. It's just not in the numbers, you know, in the calls. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, and it's, you know, I've heard it from you before, but I still believe that it is an acceptable rate at this point. Anybody else from the public?
Yeah, my name's Harry Watt, and I've been taxpayer since 1978. I have a question regarding the consolidation of the dispatch center. I guess when you have trouble with your house, you always go to the builder to find out what's going on. Well, I'm the one that built pretty much the comm center. You asked Roger about what it looked like when I was over there working on it. I know what that's capable of and what we can provide to the citizens who live here. I don't know what's gonna happen if we go to the county, especially when you start talking about our connection to them via the internet. Right now, Lisbon doesn't use the internet to talk to our server. So all of our records, everything that we do, our accidents, our records, our arrests, all go to our server by not using the internet. That's not true with Greene or Sabatis or Durham. We connect to them with the internet. But Lisbon itself is standalone. We don't use the internet. We don't rely on the internet. I can't tell you what's gonna happen when you start talking about, we're gonna give you a couple of firewalls and throw up you know, you're gonna rely on Time Warner or Comcast or whoever to make sure your records are working. The importance of that goes to the people that we serve. I have an issue, I think, with the board deciding whether we're gonna go to the county or not. I think the people ought to make that decision. It should be a referendum, it should be a vote by the people, not the board. The other thing is there's the fee structure that you're talking about. If you wanna put that in the hands of the county commissioners, I don't know. It kinda sounded like Donald Trump in here tonight. It sounded like, well, we're gonna this, and we do that, and, you know, that's something that I didn't get any warm fuzzies over what I heard from him, as a person who's lived in this town for over 35 years. And I know what we can do, I know what we're capable of, but I built it. And I can fix it. If it goes out there, I'm hands off, I got nothing to do with it. So, there's no guarantees. And I don't know if the people want to put their public safety in the hands of somebody up in Auburn, and at the hands of the county commissioners with their checkbook.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Bill Tapley, resident since 1999. I own 2 houses, I think back in town. I did hear concern about the consolidation. I'm also part of our patrol union, which the dispatchers fall under. I was told that you take into consideration and start working with them now, and so there's not a lot of guesswork for the next 8 or 9 months, that you would contact them now and figure out who those people might be. You know, I'm sure you guys are afraid people are gonna jump ship. They're gonna jump ship because they don't know. Because there are younger people that are, even in the police department, are scared of what you guys are doing or not doing. So where people are applying outside, you're gonna have a quality issue with the type of person you're gonna get hired here because, as time's gone on, our standards of living, you expect the police to be up here, but everybody else's morals and ethics have changed. So we're having a problem hiring people. So you really need to take a look at talking with the police department and the unions and stuff, let them know what's going on instead of a lot of, I had to introduce myself to the town manager. There's not a lot of communication between the two sides. You know, we really need to, especially if we're gonna talk about losing personnel, just talk to them so they're, when they're sitting here at night, they're not dwelling on it. And it's a safety issue for everybody that's out there, including our citizens.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Barry Fuller, I'm a resident of West Bowden. I've owned property in Lisbon since 1974. The town manager mentioned 2 concerns. Safety was a primary concern with the fishing game. Obviously, noise is a concern to everyone that lives within a quarter of a mile. But there's a third item that probably, if the attack this, they probably ought to consider. There is a considerable amount of lead being put in the ground within 250 feet of the brook. I own property on both sides of the brook, 1,500 feet downstream. So at this, at this stage, if you're gonna investigate, you might as well include that as part of the consideration, so we can have a consistent action plan as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Randy Griffith. I've been a resident of town of Lisbon since 1958. The Lisbon Fish and Game has been there ever since I can remember. It's been there before I have. The club itself, I am a member of the club. They're very self-regulatory. They state times in which we can shoot, so we don't disrupt local areas, the church or whatever. They are also very aware of containing the bullets. They are fixing up the berms and making sure that they are safe. So the club itself is pretty self-regulatory. It's been there. People have moved into that area. If they moved in since 1954, 55 in the club, they knew that shooting range was there. So it was their choice to move into an area where there was a gun range. I see that that was their choice. It was there, and to spend a lot of time and effort and money for the town, try to regulate something that I really don't see as a big issue. People, it's like somebody moving into a dirt road from out of state, and they say, I want sidewalks now. Basically, that's what's happening. You move into an area and you try to change the way the area is. I think it's a waste of time for the town to commit resources.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I am John Neff. I've been out there since 1993. My house has been hit, my garage has been hit, vehicles have been hit. So you tell me about safety.
Okay.
And Lisbon, he's got pictures of it.
All right.
Where do you go from there?
Thank you. Anybody else? All right.
I'd like to, Mr. Fuller's,
Sorry, I didn't see you over there.
my name is Steve Bickford. I'd like to, his concern, I understand the idea of the lead shot. This is something that's going on with a lot of the clubs. If it does come an impact, as far as the lead shot goes, what a lot of clubs are doing is they're changing to steel shot, which has no impact on the environment. So rather than eliminate the shooting aspect of it, we will require all members to use steel shot, which a lot of the Mary Main Bay facilities and stuff, they've all done that in order to be able to keep on shooting where they're shooting waterway. And so this is a concern that I'd be at, and that's what we may have to do, is go change over to steel shot.
Thank you. Is anybody else? All right. See no other comments. Anything from council? Anything else? I'll briefly just close it up. I appreciate everybody coming out this evening, ranging from the police department and the sheriff to members of the Fish and Game and the public. It's good to hear the input from the public. And I can sense there is some confusion, or not confusion, but some urgency around this committee that the council is going to put together to study the Fish and Game for an ordinance. And I'll just briefly say that just because a committee is being put together doesn't mean that something's going to come out and something is going to be changed. Just briefly, just so the council can study it to understand and get all of our facts before we make a decision. I personally am big on maintaining how things are, and I recognize that the Fish and Game has been there for a long time. So when someone moves into the area, they know what they're going to be dealing with. But I really do believe that it's important for I as a counselor to cross the T's and dot our I's to make sure that in 5 years from now the council or the town is not going to be sued for one reason or another from a lack of investigation. So just because a committee is going to be put together doesn't mean anything will change, just so we can do our homework and make sure we provide the best service to the residents of Lisbon and we're not being stuck with some bill down the road that we shouldn't have. So I encourage everyone to stay posted on it. And reach out to any counselor or myself. My email address and my cell phone number is on the website for any questions that you might have throughout this process, and I'll be happy to update you if you contact me. Yes.
Mr. Ruby, you had a concern. It was a rumor. What is the rumor?
I don't know where you heard it. I guess I really didn't have a concern, but I do have some comments. I was brought up to shoot at the Fish and Game Department, so I don't hold any grudge against the Fish and Game Department. Due to the fact that I have a business there, and I lived there, there were a few things that I did speak to the president last year about. In fact, they came up to look at my facility. In fact, I was trying to sell my building to them to keep the Fish and Game Department going. But some of the feedback that I did get from him, it made me think about a few different things. That you have a lot of members, and I think it was in the neighborhood of 300, 400, 500 members. And of those members, he started talking about the social expense to maintain that place. With that many members, this is just my personal perspective on things. If they would charge a small sum of money to maintain that property, if it was $100 a year or $50 a year, you guys would have a surplus of money, where it would enable you to do the proper thing as far as remediation to the property with all the gunshot that was there, because the property that I purchased over there was from the Cotulla residents. They were the ones that gifted that property to the Fish and Game Department back in 1954. So it was a gift to the Fish and Game Department. That's a compliance associated with the environment, which sort of goes hand in hand with the Fish and Game Department. The second thing is safety, obviously. If you do have shots going over the berm, I would consider that to be a big liability issue. I know the trail that is right near there that I looked at purchasing a few years ago, that it appeared to have bullet holes in the back of the garage. And the owner implied that to me. Also, the movement of the berm was a possibility, which I brought up a concern about, which I understand wasn't going to be moved now. And another issue was the noise, where the tin roof was put on it, which was good for shelter, for shade. But if the wind is blowing in our direction, the repercussion of that, the noise just rifles down through there. So it's extremely loud. I have nothing against it. Like I said, I would have brought up shooting there. I think the biggest issue is to maybe get it down lower if you can. What I came back with in regards to some comments was maybe just to go in there for a day. I know there's probably a ton of gravel in there because you are close to the water. To put the berms up a little bit higher maybe, and maybe fence it around as far as safety liability issues. And maybe put something with three sides with a roof on it with something as far as deadening the sound, because it is extremely loud if the wind is blowing in our direction. But beyond that, you know, I don't, that would be my personal perspective on things. So I think it's trying to find a common ground, since it has been there for a long time, but if you get 500 members at $100 a year, that's 50 grand a year. That's, okay, so it's 30 grand a year.
Right.
I guess that's my comment, and of those 300 members, I mean, how many of them are relatively local within, say, you know, the surrounding communities? How many are coming from Thompson or Brunswick or other areas that have their own facility, but they come here because of the expense? It's very minimal charge.
One of the other things is, if the council was to move forward with an ordinance of any type, we go through a public hearing process, so it'll be well advertised, and anybody can come in to address the council before we take a vote. There's a public hearing. So all that the documentation would be available, and audience participation would be too. So it's not the end of the discussion, it'll just be the beginning, and move forward. Thank you. Yeah.
I do appreciate council taking this up, because it is high time in today's day. The stray bullets flying around. It's just not a good situation. I'm glad to hear it was 1954, because we do have one resident that was there before that, who still lives there. So there is a concern from a, you know, and quite frankly, when John gave this property, I don't think he ever thought it would turn into this, and you know how things have evolved. But at the time, it was an occasional turkey shoot, is what it was. Skeet, yeah, is what it was. It used to be 2 weekends a year or some such number. So things have changed. So along with that change, it's probably time, this committee's a good thing to look at, see what other changes should go in.
Perfect. Thank you.
For taking it up.
You're welcome. And with that being said, I will bring the workshop to a close, and I appreciate everybody coming out this evening. Thank you.